So all of you that are coming in, I'm sure most of you know this channel, the Hypergraph Hour, which is kind of low-key coffee talk, like let's have a dialogue about blockchain technology, Constellation, what we're doing, identifying our roadmap, Constellation Network, Lattice Exchange, how our vision of our ecosystem comes together, and really just kind of make it a more natural, fluid conversation. And lately, we've been adding guests onto the show. We did a guest appearance with Reihito Hatayama, who, interesting enough, Jacob Mullins actually introduced to the Constellation ecosystem. We did a call last week, a Hypergraph episode with Yield App, which is some interesting announcements of how they're approaching decentralized finance and APY programs out there, and creating liquidity pools at the same time, and how does that relate to the Constellation ecosystem and L0 tokens, all the way to Benjamin Diggle's kind of identifying kind of roadmaps of the business development initiatives, and really getting into the nuances of what it means to work with the DoD and what their kind of productization of our technology is. So we kind of hit a lot of the spectrum and try to educate people that have a various range of interests and expertise, while also just kind of being very transparent about everything. We pretty much just talk about everything. So today, everybody, please meet Jacob Mullins. You might have seen Jacob and I on some panels. Years ago, we put together a panel at TechCrunch Disrupt that include people from Mozilla. We had IBM, yourself. We had a pretty packed house. But Jacob is one of my closest friends, and also has been a trusted advisor, informal advisor to Constellation. I hope you don't mind me saying that.
Yeah, not at all.
And we're going to kind of address why that is and how they, how that kind of relationship is. But Jacob is one of the brightest people I know in venture capital, traditional venture capital. We're not talking about crypto hedge funds here. And he sees kind of the future. I literally get excited to talk about Jacob and business and what he sees as trends emerging, how capital markets are flowing. So today is a really fun day, and I really want this to be a pretty dynamic conversation. We've sat on panels before, so I don't think this will be anything different. Jacob, please make an introduction to yourself. Give us a little background on yourself and being a managing partner at Shasta Ventures and painting a little picture on blockchain.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me on, Ben, and Constellation team and the Hypergraph community. So I live in San Francisco. I grew up in the Bay Area, and I've always been in technology. And primarily that's been as an entrepreneur and thinking about how can I build, or how can I contribute to building the future of what technology and products will be. That's super exciting to me. And so I've had the opportunity to do that in a number of different ways, and have started a couple of different companies over time in consumer and e-commerce, in fintech, as well as in media. And I've got to say that, the opportunities in blockchain and in crypto, and the just how it's changing a lot of the traditional technology stack, as well as the finance stack and the data stack, is really immense, and it's incredibly exciting. So I had the opportunity, and I'll get into a little more on that in a minute, but I had the opportunity to join Shasta Ventures I've been on the team for about 7 years, and Shasta was an investor in my last business. And here, we focus primarily on investing in enterprise software applications. And so we're looking at what sort of either application layer software, what sort of infrastructure, databases, developer tools are enabling the next generation of technology. And then also, what is cybersecurity, and what are the next attack vectors in cybersecurity that we should all be thinking about to enable companies to be more secure. So that's the stack we focus on. Blockchain, as it's been emerging, blockchain and crypto, is an emerging area that we look at, and we've dipped our toe in the water in a couple of investments. Let's see, probably one of our larger blockchain and crypto investments is in a Bitcoin mining farm. And so we're involved with Layer 1. You guys may have heard of that. It's operating in Texas. And they are, mining, aiming to be one of the larger miners in the US. We've done a couple of seed investments, a company called Vertalo, which is kind of doing a Carta for token holding and token custody. We invested with Macrometa, which I don't know if blockchain is a big part of their vision today, but it was then. And then what's the other one? The other one's escaping me. So in the professional life, we've looked at a lot, haven't made a ton of large dollar investments yet. However, in my personal life, I'm super fascinated by it. And so I spend a lot of time in communities, on blogs. I'm super interested in what's going on with the Terra ecosystem right now, as one, just to call one out. Been working with Ben and the team here at Constellation, looking at the vision for a long time. So excited to see how that's evolving and growing. And I think just to wrap on this one, kind of my intro, that if anything we've seen about the excitement of crypto and blockchain over the last 5 years, we've seen there's a lot of excitement and a lot of interest and a lot of dollars going to the space. But as a traditional investor in enterprise software applications, we have not seen a lot of adoption of the technology in actual use cases. And that's what's held us back from investing from a professional fund perspective. Now, I think the opportunity is here and is coming, and actually, with what Hypergraph is doing and enabling in a really new way, is for companies to be able to adopt blockchain technology and create projects a lot more easily than before. And these are critical infrastructure layers that need to exist before companies can start to build and create projects. So I think the next 5 years will be equally as exciting, but even more bright from a customer acquisition standpoint and real revenue seeing flow through the community.
Jacob, that was an awesome introduction, and I really appreciate your perspective in so many ways and why you guys have gotten involved and how you haven't. And in a bit, I do want to why I'm thinking of this. I want to come back to it, but when we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, which becomes very much a marketing slogan, but you think about all the different technologies that are classified in that. And I think that one of our and we'll go back to this later, but remind me of how you see them all merging together and using each other and to define the future path forward. Mm-hmm. But I would love to, I think you touched on some interesting things, is that, traditional venture has kind of sat on the sidelines from crypto. But, and there's a massive shift happening. I remember back in the day, my dad telling me teaching me how to invest in stocks, and a price per earning ratio of 10 was healthy. Mm-hmm. And yet at the time, Apple was probably 20, and that was whoa, man, that's super risky. And now we're seeing 3,000. And so, and you talk to my dad nowadays, and he's like, well, you got to shift how you evaluate companies, and so that's just on the equity side. But, I'm curious as to how you are starting to incorporate the shifts that are occurring in traditional venture capital availability in crypto. How do you evaluate companies today, whether they work in crypto or not, and what does that process look like for you when you look at companies?
Yeah, totally. I think one of the things that venture historically has benefited from that is changing is that venture primarily has been a relatively opaque and intransparent industry, where you have a relatively small industry that are interested in taking tremendous risks on companies. And this is, let's say, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when Apple was founded and funded first, when HP was founded and funded, this was unheard of, right? Nobody was investing millions and millions of dollars into someone who has never done anything but has a great idea. That was unheard of. Fast forward to today, and guess what? Anybody, someone that's super smart, can thoughtfully write out their thesis, their perspective, using social media, launch it to a community, build the infrastructure, of a blockchain and build token economics. And guess what? You can have a company worth tens, hundreds, billions of dollars in market cap based on your idea. And that circumvents all of venture capital. So we've actually gone from like a light year like expansion of risk and the ability to get ideas off the ground. And I think that's fantastic for entrepreneurship. It's probably less good for venture, but that's okay. Sorry, did I jump in?
No. Actually, just off that point, do you think that some of these valuations are unnecessary? I mean, going back to you see hundreds of millions of dollars, billions.
Yeah.
Do you think it's unnecessary? Because you could also say, look at SpaceX, years ago was valued at billions of dollars with no revenue, but yet.
Yeah. It's a good question. I mean, all the valuations today are largely based on future opportunity and what the performance will be in the future. And I think, are they off the charts? Are current valuations off the charts for crypto projects? Yes. Are they off the charts for public enterprise software companies? Yes. Are they off the charts for ride-sharing companies and video conference companies? Yes. Everything's off the charts. That's a whole other macroeconomic question that I'm not smart enough to figure out. But thinking about how does venture, play in this space and how is traditional venture looking at it? I think this is causing a real, there's a huge shift going on in traditional venture capital where traditionally venture was the only capital source for early ideas. And now there are better capital sources for early ideas. And those better capital sources are angel investors, friends and family, crypto communities, even just crowdfunding, non-crypto standpoint. So that's actually taken the risk profile from venture out at the earliest stage. So now traditionally, right, so the risk profile is now actually being offloaded onto individuals and communities and angel investors and people who want to invest. And so that's enabled venture to focus in a slightly less risky area. And that what we do is Series A. So for what we're looking for an enterprise software company that has somewhere between $1 million and $5 million in annual recurring revenue. They've got 5 to 10 customers and are growing. And the reason we're looking for that is because it is less risky than the early stage seed investments or in crowd investing. And so we're able to fit into this gap. And so what we're looking for when we do an analysis is talking, and this is something even when I look at blockchain investments, that if they do have customers, this is what I'm looking for, which is who are those customers? And ideally, if they're enterprises, how do they use it? And are they using this technology repeatably? Are they using it for the same reason? And if I talk to 5 or 10 customers, if I ask them what is company X, they're all going to tell me basically the same thing. And I'm going to ask them, why did you buy it? And how do you use it? I want them to basically all tell me the same thing. Because what that means is that there's signs of product market fit. And product market fit is really what we're seeking for. Because once we believe we found product market fit, then building the business becomes more about an equation. It means if I can put X dollars invest X dollars to grow that business and to acquire new customers, it will yield Y dollars in revenue. And that's the predictability that we're really looking for. In another analogy, it would be a small engine that is essentially running very efficiently. It's not leaking oil, it's not leaking gas. I want that efficient engine. And if I invest in that engine, I can make it bigger, but I still don't want it to be leaking oil or leaking gas. And so, that's, as a professional kind of venture investor, that's what I'm looking for in blockchain right now, is like, where is it being used? How is it being adopted by companies? Certainly security is one of the biggest opportunities, or one of the, not biggest, it's one of the most obvious opportunities: security, money flow, and payments. And so looking at the companies that are actually being used in these ways is helpful. And I think that when we do see a company that has repeatable use case, backed by blockchain technology and as the infrastructure, I think we'll be equally as excited to jump into it as we would be with a company with traditional infrastructure today, built on Python and Rails and SQL, as we will be on a blockchain-based technology. It's really a question of customer acquisition and a question of product market fit.
That's a great insight, Jacob. Thank you so much for that. It's pretty fascinating because I do know that a lot of the venture community is also involved in crypto community, the cryptocurrency, because like you have certain limitations from your LPs that don't allow you to get involved with that. Could you shed some light on some of the different? You're part of a lot of consortia that are kind of identifying some of the gaps that exist in that paradigm. And maybe you framed it a little better when we were talking separately, but maybe you could talk to some of the initiatives that you're a part of to make blockchain and cryptocurrencies more widely accepted or fluid and easy channel.
Yeah. So, one of the big innovations in crypto is that it's a move away from equity, the traditional concept of what equity is. And as an investor, that actually, it causes a bit of a conundrum that investors are figuring out, but it's only, we've only been in this for 5 to 10 years, really, kind of the 5 years. So the traditional notion of a venture capital investor is that we invest, let's say $5 million, and for that we'll buy 20% of the company. And that company is actual equity, it's stock, it's, it is a portion of the business. And that's what traditional venture has been. However, with the introduction of cryptocurrency and tokens, there's the idea that you can actually buy crypto and tokens which are not equity, and that just confuses people. Because in the traditional venture partner agreements that we have with our investors, because we raise money too, in order to invest in companies, we very clearly say that our fund is to be used to invest in equity specifically. And we're not investing in public markets. There's actually a different SEC regulation that we need to have if we invest in public markets. And we don't have that, and by design. So we cannot invest in public markets. We are allowed to invest in convertible notes or safes, which are common instruments. But the idea of a token or a crypto asset is entirely new and undefined. And so in the early days, 5 years ago, it was a lot of people didn't do it because they didn't want to have to go back to their investors. I didn't want to have to go to my investors and say, hey, we're investing in this new thing. It's not really equity. It's not really a loan. And then I'd have to go explain it to them. And everyone on the call knows how complex and sophisticated this is. And everybody on this call has known how it goes to try to invest, to try to explain something like this to someone who has no concept. It's almost not worth its time. It's almost worth waiting until that person's ready to know what it is, then you can explain it. And so that's one of the hindrances in traditional venture, is actually getting your own investors up to speed and comfortable with it. It's adjusting your limited partner agreements. One of the big problems right now that I've been seeing going around is firms and CFOs at firms don't know how to hold crypto assets and report them in a way that is required by US law. So on an annual basis, we have auditors that need to do a real mark-to-market pricing of our equities, which the large accounting firms know how to do. They've been doing this for years. You throw crypto into the mix, they have no idea how to do it. And so all of these things just add additional complexity, which a lot of investors are allergic to complexity. A lot of investors want the easy thing that they can understand and get. And I think that's one of the, too many investors are Luddites, but, this just adds additional complexity. Now you are seeing really forward-thinking firms like Andreessen, like, they have a hybrid crypto fund, Lightspeed spun one out. So you see some firms that are really getting into it, and then you see the crypto native firms like Paradigm and others. But that means that people are starting to shift their mindset. And starting to be more welcome and open to it. The other side of it is that there's finally, you're being able to see returns, right? When this really popped off in 2017 with Bitcoin hitting 10,000 for the first time, everybody was had mania about it. And then it went quiet for a few years, and now it's coming back. But guess what? Investors in the crypto native hedge funds are starting to see returns, and people are starting to talk about the returns they've seen in the space, not only in Bitcoin, but a lot of the other projects. And that means that upstream investors, the people who invest in our funds, are saying, oh, well, I want that great return too. how can I get that great return? And so now is the time when I'm starting to hear some of our investors come calling and say, hey, what do you guys think about crypto? What do you guys think about Bitcoin? Like, is this part of your strategy? Is this not? Blah, blah, blah. And that's just a generally good sign. That means that we're going to have much more latitude to be able to invest in more interesting, assets and crypto tokens and things like that. And then last point, because I actually missed one of the key things you asked me to talk about. And, I'm on a working group with the National Venture Capital Association. It's called NVCA. And NVCA is the kind of industry organization for VC in Washington, D.C. And they lobby for regulation that benefits entrepreneurship, innovation, startups, and venture capital. And when all of these questions started coming up about crypto and blockchain, the NVCA, which is quite in touch, jumped into action and created the blockchain working group. So I'm one of the members of the NVCA blockchain working group, and we do a call once a month or so, and we think about, we basically bring to the community or to our own organization, say, hey, what are the problems our companies are facing? Over the last 4 years, it's largely been around, are you a security? Are you a utility? Right? How do you classify yourself as a business? How do you make the U.S. policy much more friendly towards crypto and blockchain entrepreneurship? On our last call, we were chatting about how do we want to see what happens with Gensler. If he's, has he been confirmed? I didn't read any news on that. But if Gensler is confirmed, how is he going to, look at and classify crypto tokens and assets? And if so, then we can start to set a policy direction for the next 4 years, at least for the rest of Biden's campaign, to understand how can we lobby through the SEC, how can we lobby through Congress and the Senate, in the Biden White House to be able to be more friendly towards enabling traditional venture to be able to invest in this space. So super long-winded answer, but there's a lot going on in how we're engaging.
Well, I think the reason, I asked that because that's, we think about adoption of blockchain technology and what does that mean? There's a technical adoption, there's an economical component, and there's, a societal component. And what you're addressing is how is an actual mindset shift on how we could say it like enterprises think about it, right? You framed this whole conversation that you back enterprise software solutions. Well, for enterprises to use this technology, they also need to know that the support from traditional venture capital is there. I mean, I can't tell you how many calls that I sit on at major companies that look at a badge from venture capital as kind of a due diligence badge. And blockchain has not really seen that. So what you're identifying is not just, your long-winded answer was really about the path to adoption from a completely different validation standpoint.
Yep. That's exactly right.
And I got to say that one of the funny things being in San Francisco was that in 2017, everybody in venture to angel investors were crypto experts. And then 2018 happened and you couldn't find a person that was like, I did I tell you about that? Stuff's a joke. Now it's like all coming back. It's like, oh yeah.
Yeah. Now everybody's a crypto. Now everybody's an NFT expert. Yeah.
Now it's like NFT. It's like, where are you people crazy? I mean, like I feel bad for your spouses and partners because it's just such a like, wait, I thought you told me last year you hated this shit. But I think one of the big things that Constellation tries to do is frame big data. And we're both in Silicon Valley, we're both in San Francisco. And so the way that we perceive a value exchange is through data. And what companies do with data is ultimately one of your investment thesis. I would say it's like an underwriting investment thesis. Yes, you have revenue, but where is that going in terms of your strategy? So maybe you could kind of, for everybody on this call, people get kind of pigeonholed on thinking that Constellation is like this one little sliver of big data, but data encompasses everything. So maybe you could kind of like explain it way better than I am and that I do,
Yeah.
And how data really plays into your narrative or how you look at the future.
Yep, totally. So our entire investment thesis, if you boil it down, it all comes down to data. You're totally right. We believe that this next 10 years of technology is going to be all about how you use data to make your business more efficient, or grow your revenue. If you look at how enterprise software and how business, I say enterprise software, but it's really just like how businesses have used and adopted software. But over the last 30 years, it's shifted. It's gone from mainframe, to on-premise, it's gone from on-premise to the cloud, it's gone from the cloud to mobile, in a very similar shift. All of those have created tremendous efficiencies for business to be able to work more efficiently, save money, or grow their revenue faster. So now we have all of these business that, 10 years ago, you're right, big data was the terminology. Everybody was investing in big data. Everybody, Internet of Things was coming around and people were capturing physical data and digital data all at once. Well, guess what? Now we have all that data, but now we need to figure out how to use that data. It's just sitting in these giant data lakes or data pools or whatever you want to call it. And so the application's ability to unlock data is what we invest in. And we call it artificial intelligence, AI in the enterprise. I actually think that's a far overly sexy word, because it's not like the enterprise software is going to take us over and take over the world. It's just basically understanding the data you have on your consumers or your efficiencies or how your business works and reapplying it to the problem. We're doing that in every single investment that we make. And we make, for context, we make about 10 to 12 investments a year. We invest between $5 and $10 million into each one. So I'd say we're quite selective investors. We meet with 500 companies a year and we invest in 10.
Wow.
So, but everything that we look at is how are you applying data? So let me give you a couple of examples. One of our fastest growing companies right now is a company called HighSpot, and it's for sales enablement. It sits on top of Salesforce, and it basically makes the salesperson who uses Salesforce, it makes them more efficient. It helps them understand who the next best person to close is and what the next best thing I should do in order to get that person to sign on the dotted line and close their business. Now, how do they do that? They do that with a ton of data. And so it's all data that exists within the organization. It's the content that exists in the organization, but it's also data feeds externally. What are those customer prospects looking at? How often are they opening your email? What content are they looking at? And HighSpot has built a system to basically understand if this customer is doing X, Y, and Z, the next thing we should do to them is A, and it will get them to close faster. So HighSpot's growing like crazy. That's one example. We have other examples in construction. We have one company that puts cameras on cranes and is able to make job sites more safe. It's able to provide better efficiency for understanding where the project is at. And then now in COVID, it's also adding some kind of COVID compliance on job sites. But all of that is visual data that is boiled down to be a very simple application to the business problem. Now, to the kind of Constellation point, it's like two things. One is companies need to be able to spin up and build projects faster and in more secure ways. And so, depending on what your application does and how it's applied, it could be, your data could be highly, highly, highly sensitive. And most companies actually have massively highly sensitive data, in which case building a very secure product on a very secure, blockchain or something like the Constellation or network or Hypergraph could make a lot of sense. And I think what's interesting is the approach you're taking is being able to do that very easily and without spinning up, an entire team of 30 people to go build or re-architect your product on a blockchain technology. So I'm actually really bullish about your approach and the way that enterprises will start experimenting with blockchain, in that they don't have to go all in. They can just try it. They can start using it in applications. And when they realize that it's truly a better solution, then they'll start to shape the business around it for the future.
No, I appreciate you saying that. One of the big things that we've had a shift on is really how the blockchain space has sold itself into enterprise. And largely, Libra token did this. Remember, we talked about this. Libra did this in selling basically nodes or sponsorships to Fortune 500 companies. That fell flat. There's been a couple other ecosystems that have been out there, like
XRP tried, right? XRP with all the kind of just the money transfer stuff.
Yeah, and so there's an interesting path on selling blockchain adoption in that capacity. And one of the ways that we take this approach is that when we talk with an organization, we tell them about a node. And they're like, oh, well, it's like Bitcoin mining. But then they start to see, okay, what does that mean for your network? Well, a node is a simple data type that they can actually deploy. And that becomes their first way of interacting with a decentralized network. And at the same time, they can earn validator rewards. But that also gets them in the queue of setting up kind of this DevOps solution, which really is kind of the nuts and bolts. So really everything kind of lies in the node. And that's been a lot of Constellation's secret, is that how do you modify that node to accept different data and validate that data? So our approach to, so one of the questions I really have is, so we see that the merging of enterprise and blockchain will happen kind of randomly. It won't be like, man, we got to blockchainize this part of our business, but it will happen kind of subliminally without people really even knowing it, to where now they're using, basically like DigitalOcean versus AWS, right? Yeah. How do you see kind of the merging of enterprise consumption of this technology and cryptocurrency in the next few years? Yeah,
it's a really good point. I think it'll happen similar to what we saw with the shift to cloud, right? The shift to the cloud was this big lauded shift, but it happened over a tremendous amount of time. And actually, it's still happening over a tremendous amount of time, right? If you listen to Microsoft earnings calls, like Satya Nadella is still like, man, we've still got another $1 trillion or $2 trillion in market cap and sales to be able to grow into the enterprise in the cloud. And guess what? To me, I think cloud is 10 years ago. I'm like, that is right? Like that seems so old. But guess what? That's how that's the pace of enterprise adoption. So it starts with one project, one example. Now, what do you start with? Well, you got to start with where the value prop is strongest, right? Enterprises are always cost conscious, time conscious. And so think about why is blockchain technology truly the best to use in these particular use cases? The Constellation team, if you guys have talked a lot about defense and data authenticity for the military, that's a great use case, right? Like if you have a mission critical project or mission going on, and you have the wrong data or hacked data or just incorrect data, catastrophic things are going to happen. So defense is a great one. Finance, putting all of DeFi aside, just validating like financial transactions because it's such high dollar value. Validating, there's a lot going on in biotech. So thinking about like, how do you validate that the right gene sequence for making the personalized COVID drug for Ben Jorgensen, making sure that that's true as opposed to be hacked or incorrect. I guess I'm all boiling down to like, how do you make sure that the data is real? Is a really strong common denominator. And I'd focus in industries where they have a ton to lose, which will be bio, finance, defense,
healthcare.
You
said bio,
Yeah. And then just, cybersecurity generally is going to be, it's such a broad term. It's almost hard to say anything even by saying that. But, being able to build products or build a blockchain product as an adjunct to your business that might secure one aspect of it. And that enables, a company to bite it off in one chunk and focus. So,
cool.
So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. And those are, frankly, as a venture capitalist, that's where I'm looking. I'm looking for applications in those use case areas to see where companies are adopting.
Very cool. Well, Jacob, I would love to. One of the pillars of Constellation is our operational governance committee that meets every week, and we kind of talk about rules, values of the network, and really discuss the kind of future of the network. And one of our big initiatives have been to dedicate like pod leads that represent different facets of the community. So we've got a product pod lead, a community and a business pod lead. And really kind of their focus is to kind of vet projects that want to build on Constellation, build an L0 token, but yet come in from a different approach, right? One comes in from a business need, right? Talking about cybersecurity solutions, finance, people that want to build something that connects to real world data. The product lead is somebody that, hey, identifies probably data science application that can be built on Constellation. Community is more around community built tools. I'd love to invite you to kind of be involved in kind of that screening and filtering process as projects come in, submit, and that's going to come next month. We're putting together a whole process and a path to success that we define from ideation to filtering and revising those businesses and the frameworks they use to build on Constellation. But it would be awesome to have you involved in kind of your insights and expertise and how to build a successful business. What should people look for? And yeah, it's different than how crypto funds evaluate projects, but I think the two blending together help kind of put best practices in place together. So I'd love to invite you and get you involved in that.
Thank you. Thanks for that invite. I'd love to do that. It's actually sounds very similar to how we do thesis-based investing, which is choosing a spot we want to learn everything about and then go learn everything about it, meet everybody in it. So I'd love to do that. Thank you.
And see, like your experience right there could really help put in some sort of operational excellence as we really define that process and what that looks like. A lot of blockchain ecosystems that have a lot of capital have similar practices where they have a grant submission process, but they don't have a clear path to success. What happens when I submit an idea? How do I get real feedback that this is something that can be used in the ecosystem? Yeah. And if I do have something good, do I have the support from that ecosystem to drive me to success? Mm-hmm. So your knowledge, your insights, I think your approachability is something that would really, really help the community in general. So I can't thank you enough.
I'd love to.
Yeah, can you tell us if you hold DAG or not?
Of course I own DAG. Yeah, I have since the beginning. Come on.
Yeah, okay. All right. Awesome, man. I know. Well, you can't assume all that, but well, man, I can't thank you enough for taking 45 minutes out of your day, sit here and talk. I mean, we get to talk all the time and hang out, but having you kind of express your industry knowledge and your perspective, you always come so warm and inviting to everything that we do, and you're super transparent that most people don't give this type of knowledge to people, and you are always an open book and an open door to Constellation, and have helped us mold this into the path that we have and the success we've had to date. So any parting words or wisdom for this community?
Well, thanks for the kind words to me. I feel like life is just about the opportunities that you take and the fortitude and the ability to stick things through, because there's so many challenges and we could get distracted by so many things. And so, I think there's no doubt about it that this is the future. And now the question is really being thoughtful about what are the use cases where you can build and drive value for the customer. And if you can find that, if you can find one use case, it's going to bring the second and the third, and that's the beginning of the wildfire. Just for every entrepreneur, dream big and then have the guts to stick it out and focus. So
I love it. That's great, Jacob. And so for all you that want Jacob's contact, you're going to have to submit an idea for an L0 business, and then we'll push it to Jacob and we'll see if he likes it. And then you're off to the races. Well, man, I can't thank you enough. And happy St. Patrick's Day. You are part Irish.
That's right. Irish Mexican. Let's do it.
I love it, man. All right. Well, have a great day, and can't thank you enough.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining. See you. Bye-bye.